My land, from the California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
Everybody, I'm Beryl Burnett. Welcome to Here and There. And how would you like to meet a pioneer today? Well, we just listened to a little bit of Woody Guthrie singing "This Land Is Your Land," and it's a pretty good song for a pioneer. And we're going to meet Lyle Greenfield, who is the proprietor, owner of the Bridgehampton Winery, and we're all going to learn a little bit about wine and maybe a lot about Lyle Greenfield. I don't know, we'll see. So here he is.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you.
Welcome.
I would like to meet a pioneer today, myself.
Okay, let's meet you. I'm going to start with the most obvious question, which is, how long has the Bridgehampton Winery been there? When did you start it?
We started building the winery itself in 1982, in the fall of 1982, and then the building was basically completed in the spring of 1983, and we've been adding to it and doing the finishing touches in the years since then. The vineyard I started planting in 1979.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. The reason I said that Lyle's, I may call you Lyle, right?
Yes, you may.
Reason I said that he's a pioneer is because he's the absolute first person to start a winery on the South Fork of the East End, and wine is altogether, wineries are altogether new on the East End of Long Island. He's going to tell us something about that. And I would say it takes a lot of courage, and you're probably going to say it takes a lot of other things to have gone into something, such a venture as big as this. So tell us about how you got into it.
I like the idea that it takes a lot of courage, but I think mostly it takes a certain amount of foolishness and spontaneity. You know, we were talking a few minutes ago about the background of those who've started their winery ventures on Eastern Long Island, and now I think there are 8 or 9 people who've done that, including myself. Mm-hmm. The very first were the Hargraves, mm-hmm. Alex and Louisa on the North Fork.
And that's very recent too, isn't it?
In the great scheme of things, it is quite recent. I think that they've been making wine for perhaps no more than 12 or 13 years now. Mm-hmm. And their reputation has certainly improved over the years. And in fact, I believe they're considered a very excellent small winery in the eastern United States at this particular point.
No, so are you. I hear you've only been making wine for a few years, and you've got all these medals that I see in front of me on the bottles. And obviously you're doing a very good job of making good wine. I don't know what else is happening, so we're going to find out. But the wine has got to be good. You've gotten national awards, right?
We have gotten some national recognition, which I'm very proud of, in fact. We have an excellent group of people working at the Bridgehampton Winery. In particular, the man who has to take credit for the wine, the quality of our product, is Richard Olson Harvick, who is the winemaker in Bridgehampton. The national recognition is limited to some extent by the fact that we are very small at this point, and basically are only distributed regionally. Only recently the wines are becoming available out of New York State. We've just picked up a small distributor in New Jersey, for example, and another one in Connecticut. Eventually I see the world coming to us at the Bridgehampton Winery. And it could be a very bad sign for Gallo and Mondavi and others of their ilk. Well,
and besides the climate, it says right here in front of me that the climate in one of these things, it tells me that the climate and the area, and I guess that means the soil and everything here, it says here, right here on this flyer, it says few regions throughout the world offer the climate, soil characteristics, and unique growing conditions so essential to the production of premium wines like that of Eastern Long Island. So it seems as though it's a pretty good thing to do. In California, here we come. Right?
It's California.
Watch out for our competition. No, your competition. That's what I meant. Right?
Yeah, the danger would be that we believe our own propaganda. And of course, this is a flyer that is put together by the Long Island Grape Grower Association in conjunction with the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. We have a wonderful climate for grape growing on eastern Long Island, but it is the northeastern United States still. This is the northeastern North American continent, and there are many difficulties here, as well as blessings that are indigenous to only this area, and some of those have to do with both the North and South Forks' proximity to the ocean itself, and our exposure to you know, severe weather extremes. But overall, we have something special here, and we have what has been a diminishing agricultural area of spectacular beauty that has found over the past decade and a half, let's say, compatible agricultural venture in viticulture, in wine growing. And it's resulted in the planting over the past 10 years, I would say, of well over 1,000 acres in European wine-producing grapes, vines, on the east end of Long Island. It's a terrific thing.
And
we're proud to be a part of it.
You should be.
Thank you.
And yet, this area, which of course did start out as farmland, has been more and more developed, and there are fewer and fewer farms as land values go up. And I think that's part of what took courage on your part to come in and stand. And also, it's an advantage for the community. I mean, there still are, I'm sure there still are farmers here who need the work, right?
There are farmers here, I suppose, who need the work. I think what's happening basically is that we're not finding on eastern Long Island, we're not finding people who have made their livelihoods in potato growing or vegetable growing since childhood. We're not finding these individuals turning to viticulture suddenly in their 50s and 60s.
How about young people?
I see very little example in our newly emerged grape industry here, very little example of the people from these families, the sons and daughters, again going into viticulture.
Really?
I see them for whatever particular reasons that just might be inherent in the modern American family, you know, going their own directions, finding other professions, finding other areas of the country to live in fact. And the people who are entering this new industry on Long Island are the crazy entrepreneurs such as myself.
Tell me about that.
Who had a dream and thought this would be a wonderful thing to do, and then those people who must be their employees, so to speak. The Richard Olson Harbicks of the world, the winemakers and people interested in viticulture as a vocation, are coming to this region because it's alive and it's economically viable.
Tell me about your dream.
You are referring to the dream of the Bridgehampton Winery.
The dream you just mentioned, to start a winery.
I think it's only fair to, if credit is to be given for coming up with an idea like this, and I'm not at all certain that deserves credit, then I think I would have to give credit to Alex Hargrave and his wife Louisa. It was in July of 1978 that I read a very special, I think, and sympathetic article written about them and their venture on the North Fork.
I think I read that article.
Well, there have been so many, but this happened to be in the Times Magazine section with wonderful four-color photographs of the family standing among the vines. And the word pioneer truly and I think accurately attached to their venture. And I thought, this is a very special idea here.
Had you always loved wine? Did you know a lot about wine?
I didn't know a lot about wine. And I can't say that I had always loved wine.
Had you visited vineyards in Europe? No.
At that juncture, I don't believe I had ever been to Europe.
You really didn't know anything about wine? Except to say, I like this kind or that kind?
Well, we said it was a dream.
Uh-huh.
And a dream can be about things that you've never done before.
Sure, absolutely.
And maybe that, in fact, is what makes dreams interesting or fascinating. It's something I had never done before, and it's something I had never considered doing before.
That's great. That's great.
Before that particular moment.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, another thing you were saying before, you were talking about the climate here and some of the problems, but here we had Hurricane Gloria, which we've all survived, and you had an award-winning wine, and this is just a few years after you started. You had an award-winning wine right after Hurricane Gloria. So you learned pretty quickly.
Yeah, I am particularly proud of that fact. It may be that there's a small group of people who would appreciate the success we've had under adversity, such as the hurricane.
Right. What did you do?
Nonetheless, we're not really excited about making a wine after a hurricane every year, frankly.
No.
Because there was considerable damage to both the crop
How did you protect
and to the
crop?
vines. There was no way to protect the crop. What we did basically was sit inside the winery building with the doors and windows shut and listen to the radio and waited for the winds to start. And when the winds started, we
prayed.
We prayed a little bit. We watched the windows and the doors begin to bow against the force of what were, I believe, between 90 and 110 mile-an-hour winds.
I remember it well. I was right here too.
We were probably a week to 2 weeks away from our natural harvest time. So we, you know, with the tons and tons of vines, of grapes hanging on the vines, we watched the winds whip them like they were nothing.
Oh.
It was a very depressing sight.
Were you drinking wine while you were watching just to help?
I think we were drinking vodka. No, I don't recall.
Oh.
We were taking aspirins.
Yeah. I got kind of excited watching the glory of Gloria and realizing the disaster, but I got carried away with what nature was doing, and I ran and got my camera and I was trying to go around photographing it, which is insane.
Yeah.
You know,
Before this venture, in fact, it's funny. I had a tourist's view of the weather, just like you might be talking about, you know.
No longer. I've lived here a few years now.
You know, if something severe was hitting, or if there was a particularly dramatic hailstorm or snowstorm or whatever, it would just be there for, I think, my aesthetic appreciation. But now, no matter, it's almost that whatever the weather can be, it affects us in some way.
Sure.
And I think about it and sometimes worry about it, although there's very little that your worrying can do.
I want to ask you something. I know you're not here all the time. I know you work in the city. We talked about that just before we started. Lyle Greenfield works for a jingle house. Do you know what jingles are? If you don't, they are the commercials that we listen to on the radio and watch on television. And it's a very, very special industry. And so he's not here all the time. I want to know about this other life of yours, but I also want to know, what do you do when there you are in the city in the middle of a problem about, okay, we've got to please that client, he writes lyrics, you write lyrics, right? I've got to come up with a lyric for this one. And some of them have been very famous, and then you hear there's a storm on Long Island or something else that you're worried about. What do you do? How do you split yourself?
It's difficult at a time like that, especially. What happens is I end up getting split. You know,
Sure.
The news from the winery affects me in a very personal way, and it is distracting.
Sure.
And fortunately, I'm working in Manhattan in a very forgiving environment, I would say. I have the owner of our company, which is called Tom Anthony Music, is a highly creative individual who has a home on Fire Island and many of his own dreams. And he seems to understand the importance of distractions and dreams and having other things in your life. But there is very little that can keep me away from important news or important events at the winery. So we basically have a tremendous phone bill.
I'm sure you do.
From Manhattan to Bridgehampton.
I'm sure you do. How do you support the winery? Can I ask you that? I mean, it seems to me that this must be an awfully costly venture. Maybe now it's supporting itself, maybe not. But how do you work? I mean, it's kind of a personal question, but how do you finance a new business like this, which has tremendous potential, but in the meantime, what do you do?
You know, as I hear you asking that question, I'm realizing to myself
you don't know.
that if each one of us in America could give 10 cents to the Bridgehampton Winery, each one of us could feel that we've made a difference and helped support a growing enterprise.
In other words, he needs help, right? We should all drink more wine. Or
the
at least
Bridgehampton Winery has, even before there was a winery, from the moment that there was a piece of property and then suddenly a piece of property with a small vineyard on
and
it.
a beautiful building that's modeled somewhat after the potato barns in this area. Beautiful building.
The venture has always been undercapitalized. And when I bought that piece of property in Bridgehampton, which consisted of 74 acres at the time, I had $4,000 in the bank. And I've become an incredible liar over the period of years that I've owned this property.
How long have you owned it?
I guess I closed and bought that property in 1979, in February of 1979.
$4,000.
Yes.
I need some lessons in finance, not in winemaking, from you.
I've learned how to talk to bankers in their own special language.
Whoa.
I don't know, for some reason the bankers on Eastern Long Island are somewhat more trusting than they are in New York City.
Oh my.
At any rate, we've been able to convince people every step of the way that there was an economic validity in this enterprise, that starting an agricultural venture as complicated and as difficult as a vineyard took time, but everywhere around the world where there were wine regions, it took time. And so we must learn on Eastern Long Island to be patient with this kind of a venture. It's not a situation in which we're going to start a shoe store and we're going to build the shoe store in March and we're going to stock it in April and we're going to open the doors in May. And I have been able to convince bankers that that it takes time.
And
both
this is even
to
though
grow the
you
grapes and to make the wine.
even though you had no background in winemaking.
Yes.
Ooh.
See, I'm not the only dreamer out here.
No, it's true that means the bankers are joining your dream in a sense. But the other thing, it's a really long dream, because I read an article. They put out a newspaper at the winery. It's kind of a newspaper format called the Hampton Grapevine. Can you see that? Right there. And it's got various articles. One by Lyle, one by Richard. What's Richard's last name?
Richard Olson Harbeck.
Richard Olson Harbeck, and then various other people. And it talks about winemaking and other things. And what was my question going to be? I don't remember. I really don't remember.
Well, we were talking about bankers and their willingness to share in a dream like this.
Yeah, and it is a dream. And here it is. It's new. Oh, and one of the articles in here, I do remember. One of the articles in here, you say that that you expect to be a very old man by the time these vines really mature and are producing what they will be capable of, and you may never see it. Hopefully you will see it, right?
I agree with you. Right. I hope that I will see it.
Right. And so that's a dream that's going to take, I mean, you're going to have all sorts, you're already having all sorts of satisfaction along the way, but it's a dream for the future, and that's wonderful. That's a pioneer, having pioneer dreaming, not just spirit, because that's what the people anywhere pioneers. If they don't just think of, okay, right now and next year and 10 years from now, it's what's going to happen 50 years from now. What are we building? And it's wonderful.
Yeah. At various times in our brief history, I've had to put together a business plan. And the business plan includes projections, 3-year projections for the success of the winery. And based on my early business plans, I would be retired from my New York City advertising career about 4 years ago. And based on the current projections, this would happen about 5 years from now. And I don't know exactly what to say about this, except that if someone were to say to me, what if you achieved everything here that you set out to achieve in Bridgehampton? The vineyard were a complete success and fully mature. The wines were recognized nationally, internationally. The Bridgehampton Winery were producing and selling enough product to literally carry its own weight in the world. I'm not sure what I would do then. I'm not sure that this would be this would be a satisfying idea, but I would wonder to myself, what's next? What would we do next? The thing that has become most satisfying about this is the process of trying to achieve it. And I wish I could explain that.
I think that's true of almost everything.
I think you're probably right. You know, I've had 17 years in the advertising industry, most of those years as a writer for agencies, for advertising agencies. And something that occurred to me after several years in this industry, after producing, you know, that exciting feeling of producing my first television commercials and radio commercials.
Tell us some of the ones that people might recognize.
Well, in years gone by, I worked on the Ford business, and I did you know, commercials and print advertising and radio commercials for the Ford Granada, the Ford Mustang, and other Ford cars.
Pretty huge account.
I worked on the Gillette and Pepsi-Cola International.
Biggies, all the biggies.
Well, they were a lot of large accounts.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point I was trying to get to, I guess, was that what was most exciting about this for me was the act of coming up with an idea for a commercial. Actually, I enjoy writing, so the act of writing the commercial, and the act also of selling the commercial to both people in the advertising agency and then to our clients as well. And once the commercial was produced, I owned a cassette for my own personal portfolio, a cassette of this 30-second commercial. And I could take very little satisfaction from either holding that cassette up or telling people that I did that.
Or even listening to it.
Or looking at it or listening to it. It was done.
I really do think that's true of anything. It's particularly true maybe of creative people. I don't know. I don't usually like that word, creative, but I find too that with anything that I'm trying to do, it's the fun is in the trying. And the fun is in the making it happen. But once it's done, it's done. It's finished.
We agree.
And so I just do understand that, and I think you picked something in the winery where it's never going to be finished.
I never dreamed.
Right.
I talked about a shoe store earlier, and I realized now if I had just spent the amount of money that I have spent and borrowed and earned starting a shoe store in 1979, do you realize how big the shoe store could be now?
Well,
Lyle's
no,
shoes.
I understand that shoes, if the shoe business has been in a lot of trouble.
Oh, well, I'm glad I didn't start that.
And besides, it wouldn't have been nearly as much of a challenge.
I agree.
So let's keep the challenge going. I want to know what else I know there's not a lot of time left, and I know that we've got to talk about some of your special wines and the medals around their necks. So which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, the wines sitting on this table with us are two that we're very proud of. One is a Merlot, and I think that's it. No, the one you had your finger on is a Merlot.
Here we go. And it's got a medal around its neck. Should I take the medal off and read it?
You're welcome to.
Thank you.
The wine has won a number of state and national awards. I think this one is the silver medal.
For the New York...
In the New York State Wine and Grape Foundation competition.
1986 Wine Classic.
Yeah. Which was the best of state, or the best of show in that particular competition.
Terrific. And this one?
That is a wine, it's a white table wine that we call Premier Cuvée Blanc. And the wine is, consists of two European grape varietals. One is dry Riesling, and the other is Gewürztraminer.
It sounds wonderful. Does it taste as good as it sounds?
It's a beautiful wine. We gave the wine, which basically has, the grape components are sort of Germanic, actually, Riesling and Gewürztraminer. And this particular region of the United States is not that fond of dry Rieslings. So what we did to make people understand and appreciate this wine more was give it a French name.
And its name is?
It's Premier Cuvée Blanc.
Okay.
First white
Premier
blend.
Cuvée Blanc. And it has won the New York State Commercial Wine Competition in 1985. And what is that special one over there with its gorgeous bronze medal around its neck?
Yeah, the wine over there we're very proud of.
And that's the one. That's the one near the poster.
That is our in 1985 Estate Reserve Chardonnay. Which means that the wine, pardon me, was grown and produced entirely at the vineyard in Bridgehampton. It was aged and it was fermented in 2 types of French oak barrels. It's I think a very, very beautiful wine. And
we're going to taste it before the end of this program, aren't we? Because it's open and ready.
Yeah, I think we should taste it. It's after 10 a.m.
I think we should too. I tell you what, if you will tell us what you are planning to do that the public might be interested in. I understand you have this, well, it's really a party, but it's an event that you're planning for every year. I'm going to go over and get that bottle of wine while you're telling us.
Okay.
All right.
Particularly in the tourist season, which of course has expanded now every year. But beginning in spring and running late through the fall, the Bridgehampton Winery has tours and tastings every day of the week, and intensified on the weekends. I believe we have 4 tours and tastings on Saturday and Sunday. In addition to that, we have various events at the winery, and in particular the one you're referring to, I think, is our Harvest Festival.
Tell us about that.
We try to be involved in events that basically will increase people's interest in winemaking and give them a bit of an education in the viticultural and winemaking experience.
We're going to have an event right now because I've just been given a signal that we've got 1 minute.
1 minute.
1 minute to go. And this has won the bronze medal for the Eastern Wine Competition, the international competition in 1986. And another one, it's also won the New York Wine Classic in 1986. It's full of medals.
Yeah,
and here we go. And it is the Bridgehampton 1985 Chardonnay. And won't you join us?
Well, I'll certainly join you.
Well, I'm talking to the audience as well as to you, and I'm toasting all of you. And why don't you join me in doing that?
Thank you
here's to you, and cheers, and good luck this week. We hope you'll be back as we go here and there next week.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank
Have
you.
a good week.
Your land,
What a way to
this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters.
Thank you, Bill.
This land was made for you
Thank you
and
very
me.
much.
Thank you very much.
As I went a walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me
I
that
think I went
golden
rambling. I
valley.
think,
No, I forgot.
This
no, in
land
fact,
was
it's better
made
to
for
taste a
you and
wine
me.
at room temperature almost, because you'll experience more of what the fruit characteristics are.
I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her
This
diamond deserts.
I found out that
All
an engineer we
around
work with frequently
me, a voice was
in
sounding.
Manhattan
This
is a guy
land was
named Jim
made for
McCurdy,
you and me.
and his dad is Ed McCurdy,
When the
who
sun
was
comes
he's a folk
shining,
singer and
and I
writer
was
from
strolling,
the
wheat
Guthrie
fields
era.
waving, and the dust clouds
And he wrote
rolling.
last night